He saw a frail, blind woman and thought she was an easy target for his cruelty. He didn't know her blindness came from a battlefield explosion, or that her son was a man who specialized in making bullies disappear. The bell above the door of the All-American Cafe chimed softly, a familiar sound that marked the 11 a.m. arrival of Eleanor Vance. At 74, she moved with a careful, deliberate grace, her world defined not by sight but by sound, scent, and the gentle pressure of the harness in her left hand. At the other end of the harness was Gunnar, a golden retriever whose intelligent eyes missed nothing, his tail giving a slow, steady thump-thump against the doorframe. For the staff in the Fayetteville, North Carolina diner, this was a cherished ritual. "Morning, Ellie," called Sarah, the waitress, her voice warm like the coffee she was brewing. "Your usual table is waiting for you." "Thank you, Sarah." "Smells like you've made fresh apple crumble today," Eleanor replied, a small smile gracing her lips. Her face was a roadmap of a life fully lived, framed by silver hair, but her most prominent feature was the pair of dark, impenetrable sunglasses that never left her face. Gunnar led her flawlessly past the worn linoleum tiles and red vinyl booths to a small table in the corner. He settled onto the floor with a quiet sigh, his body a warm, solid presence against her leg. This was their sanctuary, a pocket of kindness in a world that had long ago stolen the light from Eleanor's eyes. She didn't need to see the worn American flag on the wall or the photos of local soldiers, she could feel the respect in the air, a quiet acknowledgement of the sacrifices made in this town, the home of Fort Bragg. 2 tables over, a man watched this gentle scene with a sneer. He was broad-shouldered and covered in faded tattoos, a leather vest with a snarling viper patch stretched tight across his chest. His name was Spike, and his patience was as thin as the diner's coffee. He slammed his empty mug down on the table, the sharp crack making heads turn. "Hey! Service," he barked, glaring as Sarah carefully placed a glass of water on Eleanor's table and took a moment to ask how her week had been. "Look at this," Spike muttered to his companion, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "Whole place grinds to a halt for the charity case. Some of us have places to be." Eleanor gave no sign she had heard him. Her focus was on the familiar geography of her table, the salt shaker to the left, the sugar dispenser to the right. She had been an Army intelligence officer, trained to map out entire enemy compounds in her mind. A tabletop was simple. She had faced down colonels and insurgents with nothing but her wits. The grumblings of an impatient man were just static, background noise in a world she had learned to navigate through superior focus. Her stillness, however, was not seen as strength by Spike. He saw it as weakness, an invitation. The tension in the cafe was a physical thing, a low hum of discomfort that settled over the morning patrons. Gunnar felt it first. The dog's body stiffened, and a low, almost inaudible growl rumbled in his chest, a vibration Eleanor felt through the floor. It was a warning, subtle but clear. Spike noticed the dog's reaction and a cruel grin spread across his face. He saw it as a challenge. "What's the matter?" he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Gonna let your mutt fight your battles for you, Grandma?" Eleanor placed a calming hand on Gunnar's head, whispering, "Easy, boy. Not our fight." But Spike was already standing up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He wanted an audience. As he swaggered past their table, feigning a trip to the restroom, he deliberately stuck out his heavy biker boot, aiming to trip the service dog. It was a petty, mean-spirited act, but Gunnar was faster. The dog shifted his weight with the fluid grace of a creature far more noble than his aggressor, and Spike's boot met only air. The quiet failure, the fact that even a dog could so easily outmaneuver him, lit a fuse in Spike's temper. Humiliation curdled into rage. He spun around, his face a mask of fury, and stomped directly toward Eleanor. The diner fell silent. "You think you're special?" he snarled, looming over her table. "Think you can just ignore me?" Eleanor remained seated, her head tilted slightly as she tracked his voice. She did not answer. Her silence was a wall he couldn't breach, and it drove him over the edge. In one swift, vicious motion, he reached out and ripped the sunglasses from her face. The collective gasp from the room was sharp and immediate. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, the architecture of her injury was laid bare for all to see, the scarred, closed eyelids, the testament to a violent moment in a faraway land. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," Spike roared, his ignorance on full display. And then he swung. His open palm connected with her cheek. It wasn't the hardest slap, but it was the loudest sound in the world. The crack echoed off the tile and chrome, a sonic boom of pure cowardice. Her head snapped to the side from the impact. The stolen glasses clattered to the floor. For a long, horrifying moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. They had just witnessed the unthinkable, a man striking a blind, elderly woman in a place she had believed was safe. In the ringing silence that followed the slap, Eleanor did not cry out. She did not flinch. Years of military discipline, of holding a position under fire, took over. She slowly, deliberately, turned her head back, aiming her face not at where Spike stood, but at the sound of his ragged, angry breathing. Her cheek throbbed with a dull, hot pain, but her expression was a mask of cold composure. Spike stood over her, chest puffed out, expecting tears or pleas. He got neither. He got something far more unsettling. Her voice, when it came, was not the quavering tone of a victim. It was low, steady, and devoid of any emotion except a chilling certainty. It cut through the thick silence like a shard of ice. "My son once told me," she began, her words measured and precise, "for men like you, there are no shadows to hide in." "You're about to find out what he meant." A flicker of confusion, then amusement, crossed Spike's face. "Your son. What's he gonna do, send me a strongly worded letter?" He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that died in his throat as he saw the utter lack of fear in her face. Eleanor ignored his taunt. She issued a simple, one-word command into the air. "Gunner. Phone." The response was immediate. The golden retriever, who had remained perfectly still and silent at her side, rose, nudged her handbag from the seat, and delicately retrieved the simple smartphone within. He placed it gently into her outstretched hand. The seamless, practiced maneuver was a small marvel of training and devotion that left the onlookers in quiet awe. Holding the phone, Eleanor didn't need to find the screen. "Call Jack," she commanded. The phone beeped and began to dial. A moment later, a voice was on the other end, inaudible to anyone else. Eleanor's side of the conversation was terrifyingly brief. "Jack," she said, her voice calm. "It's Mom. There's been an incident at the All-American." She paused, listening. "Yes. I'm fine." Another pause. "I'll see you soon." She ended the call and commanded the phone to go dark. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't issue threats. She didn't need to. She had simply made a statement of fact to the universe. A reckoning had been summoned. And now, all anyone in the All-American Cafe could do was wait. Spike's smirk began to falter, the first crack in his bravado appearing as he realized he had not slapped a helpless old woman, he had activated a protocol he could not possibly comprehend. 20 minutes passed. To the patrons of the All-American Cafe, it felt like an eternity. The air was thick with unspoken anticipation. Spike had returned to his table, trying to project an air of nonchalance, but his eyes kept darting toward the door. The other customers whispered in hushed tones, casting worried glances at Eleanor, who sat in stoic silence, one hand resting on Gunner's back. There was no warning. No wail of sirens, no roar of heavy engines. The arrival was a whisper. 3 black, immaculate Chevrolet Suburbans, their windows tinted to an opaque, menacing darkness, glided to a stop in front of the diner. They moved with a synchronized, predatory grace, absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. They were utterly devoid of markings, government or otherwise. They were anonymous, and therefore, terrifying. The doors opened in unison. 8 men stepped out. They were not in uniform. They wore simple, functional civilian clothing, jeans, tactical pants, plain t-shirts, and baseball caps pulled low to obscure their faces. But there was no mistaking them. They moved with a coiled, athletic economy, their posture relaxed but their eyes constantly scanning, assessing, missing nothing. They didn't walk, they flowed. They were phantoms given form, their very presence changing the atmospheric pressure of the quiet Fayetteville street. Leading them was a man in his late 40s, his jaw set like granite and his eyes the color of a winter sky. This was Colonel Jack Vance. He moved with an authority that needed no uniform or insignia. It was in his bearing, in the way the other 7 men formed a loose, protective diamond around him without a single word being spoken. They entered the diner. The jingle of the bell above the door sounded like an alarm. If the slap had frozen the room in shock, this entrance froze it in pure, primal fear. Spike, who had been trying to laugh it off moments before, felt the blood drain from his face. These were not cops. These were not soldiers. These were something else entirely. They were the men who operated in the shadows he hadn't known existed, and they had just stepped into the light. The quiet confidence Eleanor had displayed now made horrifying sense. She hadn't called for help. She had called in the consequences. The 8 men fanned out, securing the room with nothing more than their presence. They didn't draw weapons, their gaze was enough. The patrons of the cafe shrank back in their booths, instinctively understanding they were witnesses to a form of justice far outside their civilian world. Colonel Jack Vance walked directly past the petrified hostess, his eyes fixed on one person only, his mother. He navigated the tables as if they weren't there and knelt beside her chair. His movements were gentle, a stark contrast to the lethal energy he projected. He tenderly picked up the fallen sunglasses from the floor, wiped them clean with a thumb, and gently placed them back on her face, restoring her shield. "You okay, Mom?" he asked, his voice a low murmur only she could hear. "I'm fine, Jack," she whispered back, reaching out to touch his arm. He was just loud. Jack gave Gunnar a soft scratch behind the ears, then he stood. He turned, and his gaze fell upon Spike. For the first time, Jack's eyes held a discernible emotion, a cold, clinical disgust. He approached the biker's table, not with a stomp, but with the silent tread of a hunter. He leaned in close, his voice a whisper that carried more weight than a shout. The diners saw Spike begin to tremble. They saw his eyes widen in sheer terror as Jack spoke words meant only for him. The biker's face, already pale, turned the color of ash. Whatever was said, it was a sentence delivered and a future erased. Then, Jack straightened up. He addressed the silent room, his voice calm and clear, a field report being delivered with perfect clarity. "For those of you who were wondering," he began, "this lady's sunglasses are a replacement for the eyes she lost when an IED took out her Humvee in Baghdad." He let the words hang in the air. She was pulling her wounded driver from the burning vehicle when the second bomb went off. She chose to face the darkness so that men like him, he nodded almost imperceptibly at the quivering biker, could live in the light, free to complain about their coffee getting cold. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "What you saw today wasn't a man striking a blind woman. You saw a coward attacking a soldier. You saw him attack a hero." He turned his attention back to Spike, his voice dropping back to a quiet command. "You're going to leave. Now. You will not look at my mother. You will not speak. And you will never show your face in this town again. Am I understood?" Spike could only manage a series of frantic, jerky nods. He scrambled from the booth, fumbling like a frightened child, and practically ran for the door. The other operators parted for him, their silent, contemptuous stares burning into his back until he was gone. As quickly and silently as they had arrived, they prepared to leave. Jack helped his mother to her feet, his hand a steady presence on her elbow. One of his men quietly approached the counter and dropped $100 bill next to the register. For her meal, and for the trouble, he said to the stunned waitress, then melted back toward the door. There would be no viral video. No news crews would descend upon the All-American Cafe. The faces of these men were never meant for cameras, their actions were written in whispers and local legends, not headlines. They were ghosts, and they faded back into the Fayetteville afternoon, leaving behind 3 black Suburbans and a silence filled with awe and a renewed sense of justice. The story of that day became a piece of town folklore, a cautionary tale told in hushed tones at Fort Bragg and in the local bars, a story about what happens when you mistake quiet dignity for weakness, a story about a son who commands shadows. A few weeks later, Eleanor Vance stood on a parade ground at the heart of the base, the North Carolina sun warm on her face. She was not there as a victim, but as a guest of honor. Before her stood a line of newly minted female soldiers, their faces bright with pride and nervousness. An officer read a citation, and then a young lieutenant stepped forward. Eleanor was to present her with an award for exceptional courage during training. Instead of just handing it over, Eleanor asked the young soldier to lean closer. With practiced fingers, she reached out and gently touched the sharp, new insignia on the lieutenant's collar. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the silent field. "Courage isn't about what you can see in front of you," she said, her fingers tracing the symbol of rank and responsibility. "It's about what you're willing to give up so that others can have a future. My light was exchanged for yours. Make it shine brightly." In that moment, she was not a blind woman. She was a beacon, her strength not diminished but transformed, her legacy not in what she had lost, but in the light she continued to give to others. Courage has many forms, and some of the strongest battles are fought in silence. Who is the strongest woman you know? Share your respect and stories in the comments below. Please be kind and respectful in your comments.